So my big question is, can ChatGPT help me to become a better investor and a better dividend investor? Now, of course, there's only one real way to test this out, which is to use ChatGPT and find out. Now, as we can see here, you can just ask it a question. So my simple question is, can you help me to become a better dividend or a better investor, full stop? And it'll be interesting to see how the system responds to that. Obviously, as we can see, it takes a little bit of time. Now, I've asked whether or not it can help me to become a better investor. That's not necessarily a better dividend investor or an investor that's, focused on income and dividends. And we'll see what it comes up with. Okay, so it's taken a little bit of time, but it's actually started to provide me with some answers here. And I think the key point here is general advice. So educate yourself, goals, diversify, consider risk, long-term strategy. So I don't think there's anything, particularly here that I find insightful. So we're going to dig into some of these issues in a bit more depth and detail and try and figure out if there's any opportunities here to become a much more successful dividend investor. Perhaps a really nice thing, of course, is consult with a financial professional for personalised advice. It's kind of nice that they've got that there. And my next question, of course, is, how can you actually help me to become a more successful dividend investor, full stop. Now hit subscribe, let me help you become a better investor. Okay, so it's giving me some tips on becoming a more successful dividend investor: quality, with steady dividend payments and a good history, diversification, strong financial position, reinvest your dividends, review and assess the companies in your portfolio, be patient, don't sell during market downturns, get professional advice and stay informed about the companies and the industries in which you invest. So again, this is all fairly generic. Some of this focuses on behavioral elements here, such as reinvesting, such as diversifying. There's some elements here as well about looking for or selecting an investment strategy here. So my next question is, how can I pick safe dividend investments? And it'll be interesting to sort of see how it addresses this issue. And again, it's given very sort of generic, useful points here. Well-known, steady track records, industry growth potential, dividend payout ratios, diversification to reduce risk, review and assess, and get professional advice. So I'm going to ask a few more detailed questions now. So I'm kind of interested in how well it addresses sort of these ideas, say, around dividend payout ratios, so sort of getting a little bit more in-depth and in detail. So I'm asking, how can it help me use the dividend payout ratio to find a good company that will be sustainable in the long run? So it's given some elements here, so obviously calculating the ratio, annual dividend payments by net income, stability ratios between 50 to 75%. I think that could be a little bit on the high side for some companies and perhaps a little bit low, say, for utility stocks. Think about company growth. Low payout ratios mean there's more room to increase dividends, so that's a good point. You might start with a lower yield and hope to grow that over time. Look at their earnings, make sure earnings are stable and support dividend payments. Make sure the payout ratios are more or less comparable with others in the industry. And again, review regularly and get professional advice. So I find it interesting that it's always throwing this in here as well for investment advice. And I think this comes back to the whole ChatGPT element around, making it natural and safe to interact with and not sending us down a bad pathway. So I'm digging a little bit deeper into these ideas around payout ratio. So again, trying to get sort of technical answers. And it's given me a fairly nice answer here to my question about dividend payout ratio based on free cash flow and when we should use this. So it's giving, I think, a reasonable answer here. So it's kind of like asking a tutor this question. And it seems to be providing me, I think, with a reasonable answer here based on a fairly specific sort of technical question. Digging a bit deeper then, what is a good dividend payout ratio for your utility stock or utility companies? So these are often a little bit higher than other companies, so I'm interested to see what it says. Okay, utility companies usually have stable, predictable cash flow, steady dividends, etc., etc. So some relatively short points there, so that's a good payout ratio, and we're going to dig into these issues in a little bit more detail next as well. I like to use different payout ratios for utilities. So it's interesting to sort of see what it says here. No difference in the calculation, difference in the interpretation of the ratio. So higher payout ratios might be considered sustainable. Dividends per share by earnings per share. So it sort of hasn't really taken into account this idea of sort of free cash flow, or when or whether or not free cash flow might be useful for dividend payment stocks. Another point here would be, how is a dividend payout ratio calculated differently for REITs than for other investments? Normally I'd use an AFFO here. And here we go. It's sort of noting here that, again, that it's just spitting out the standard dividend payout ratio here, which is not particularly useful to me. And again, it hasn't really touched on this idea of funds from operations or adjusted funds from operations here for REITs, which is an interesting sort of area that it's missing out on here. So we started with some fairly sort of generic comments here around, how to be good investors, and it sort of gave generic answers around, make sure there's a strong financial position and stable earnings. So let's get a little bit more insight from ChatGPT about whether or not they can sort of give us some help here. Okay, so a couple of key sort of metrics here. So nothing so far that I think is sort of particularly interesting. So again, if I was a new investor, these might be some measures that I didn't know about. And these could be measures then that I might want to go away and check, and hopefully it's going to tell me to use a financial advisor. Yes, here it goes. Okay. So here's a sort of a good idea. So thinking about a quality company, we'll often say they've got strong competitive advantages or a wide economic moat. So one sort of quite qualitative question, quite a general question is how do I identify one of those companies? And it'll be interesting, I think, here to see what ChatGPT says. I've made it think a little bit. Let's just pause the video and let it do its magic. Alright, so it started giving me a couple of key points here. So it's explaining to me what an economic moat or competitive advantage sort of means. Here are some factors I can consider. So I guess, I could use these factors to sort of qualitatively assess a company, to understand whether or not they have a, that strong competitive advantage. But it so far hasn't really given me any insight into how I would make that assessment. So it'd be interesting to see if it can go a little bit further than this. So intellectual property, customer loyalty, regulation, market share, etc. It's making me do the hard work here. It says, hey, look, I got to check financial statements and market reports and other factors as well. But again, it hasn't really given me any insight on the how to do that. I did ask, how can I determine if they have that? So that's basically just giving me a list of factors to assess. Now, a very general question, how can I become a great investor like Buffett? Now, I'm sure it knows who Buffett is, and it's picked out correctly. I'm talking about Warren Buffett, so it's able to detect the context of Buffett and the context of investing. And here, I think there's some fairly generic perspectives here. So it's sort of basically saying, he takes a very long-term, he takes a value investing approach, he reads a lot himself, and so obviously we'll have to understand that a lot. Buffett does enjoy, it's interesting here, the comment that he advocates for a diversified portfolio. Some would say he actually sort of has quite a well-concentrated portfolio in particular sectors and businesses. Disciplined and focused, patience, fundamentals, and seek out quality companies. So again, they are very much here pushing this idea of, I think, providing us with safe, secure answers as well to these questions that we're asking. So maybe getting into specifics then, is Intel a good stock to buy for dividend income? So this is fabulous. So the system cannot provide investment advice. So again, I think this is really getting back to this idea of, the system itself is not designed, or it's designed to be safe to interact with, so it's not trying to do a job that it cannot do. So it's sort of saying it's a personal one depending on your investment goals, risk tolerance, and overall situation. It's warning us as well, and this is probably one of the big challenges with ChatGPT as well, is there's a knowledge cutoff. So as far as I know, it's paid dividends since 92, it's increased dividends payout consistently over the years. What it doesn't know is that there's now talk of Intel cutting the dividend, and it doesn't have access to that information in the database that it's drawing from and using. So again, it's sort of generic factors here that we might consider when investing for dividend income, and again, get a financial advisor, do thorough research, etc. So overall, can the system help me? It can help, I think, with investors looking for some basic ideas and some basic insight into what measures and metrics may be and how to use them and how to assess them. Obviously, I think it's designed so it's not going to give investment advice, which is probably a good thing. And I would say it gives fairly generic sort of statements as well. So I think, if you're a new investor, I think this ChatGPT can give you some insight, give you some ideas. It can help you to learn some of the basic principles that you might be confused about. So rather than sort of trawling through blog posts and YouTube videos, you could actually come here and ask exactly what you want to know, and it's going to give you a really easy to understand answer as well. So a lot of opportunity here, but I think very much for a new investor.